Greetings and salutations, my friend. Antinatalism, antinatalism. Yeah, that's a topic I wanted to cover on this channel for quite a long time now, and I finally got a chance to. So here we go. In this video I'm going to tell you exactly why I no longer identify as a antinatalist and why I no longer think that antinatalism is the best philosophy out there when it comes to reproduction and the potentiality of human future or reduction of human suffering. But before we get into that, I would like you to understand what exactly was it about antinatalism that attracted me to it, to this ideology. And even before we get to that, first, to those who don't know, perhaps I should explain what antinatalism is. And at the end of this video, we'll see if there's any merit to this ideology, if it's all full of shit, or if there's actually some good points to it. Basically, antinatalism is an ideology that assigns negative value to reproduction and coming into existence, bringing new life into existence. And right from the start, I want to make a clear distinction between philosophical antinatalism and reactionary antinatalism, because under certain circumstances, anyone can be a reactionary antinatalist, right? If there's war, or potentiality of war coming very soon, it's right around the corner, less people will have kids, right? That's reasonable. Like, you don't want to raise your kids in this type of world. Same has been happening lately, where certain individuals, usually young people, decide not to have kids because of the risk of climate change. They're worried about the future and thinking, what's the point of having kids if they're going to suffer in a world with a rapidly changing climate? The world is probably going to end in 20 years or so. I don't know, some people say it's 7-5. We really can't know that, and I choose to be an optimist there. But let's assume, you know, for the sake of the argument, that it is the case that the world is going to end in 20 years or so because of the climate. Well, would it be moral to bring a new life into this sort of world? So a lot of young people choose not to have kids because of that. They may call themselves antinatalists, or they may not call themselves that. But this type of reactionary antinatalism, which can also be applied to economics as well. People may not want to have kids if they're living in a poor country, or if their own personal financial situation is really bad. They may not want to have kids. This is often a temporary state, because once their life situation is better, they might decide to have kids at that point. You see, philosophical antinatalism differs from that, because according to philosophical antinatalism, bringing new life into this world is immoral under any and all circumstances. There are several ideas I have developed over the years which led me to assume the antinatalist position. One of them being the fact that coming into existence is unconsensual. You cannot ask an unborn person if they want to live, right? That will be an impossibility. It's an impossible task to achieve. And we're not just talking unborn child, because that could be, you know, in the case of a fetus, but if you ask a fetus if they want to be or not, well, it's a bit too late because they're already alive at that point, right?
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Even though, you know, some people don't really consider unborn babies alive, I think there is no biological reason to believe that. So let's get to the start of life, where it actually starts, and I think it's the moment it develops its individual DNA. So let's go before that, right? Before insemination. You cannot ask a non-existent individual if they want to live. So no matter what sort of life you're going to offer them, no matter if you're going to be an amazing parent, if you're going to be an awful parent, if their environment is supportive or if their environment is toxic, if they live in a time of peace or if they live in a time of war, none of that matters because it's still unconsensual. You are still forcing them into this existence against their will. And even if you ask yourself what's wrong with that, that's just the way of life, right? It's nature, it's natural. We were meant to reproduce, and that's, you know, either in our biological nature, or some people would say that that's the mission God has given us to, you know, populate the planet. But it becomes more complicated when you start thinking about the negative implications and consequences of being born, such as suffering and, well, death, right? If you are giving life to your child, you are sentencing them to death in a way. I mean, not in a way, you're actually doing that. Perhaps that is not your intention. It's not like you're sitting there with, you know, a pregnant belly and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to give this child a life so they can die. In most cases, that is never a parent's or a mother's intention, or a father's intention, except the father can't get pregnant, of course.
What did you say?
But that is the inevitable end of that process, whether you like it or not. And, you know, a lot of us, when we're either planning to have kids, or we're already expecting, or if our child has just been born, we imagine this cute little baby, we imagine this fun little kid growing up, learning to talk, learning to read and walk, playing around, you know, being a rascal. That's what we're usually imagining. You know, we're seeing them as this happy little kid. But very few parents before their child is born are imagining their child as a sick elderly person suffering from all sorts of chronic diseases, or maybe dying in a painful way. We do not want to imagine that because it makes us uncomfortable. Imagine even worst case scenarios, because dying of old age or dying of disease when you're old, that's not the worst case scenario. Now imagine your child, well, most likely in an adult age, or maybe even as a child, experiences intense torture, right? Our body has been equipped with nerves that register pain, so it tells us when there's something wrong with that body, but it's so easy to use that for a nefarious purpose, right? So just torture, a process to give measurable pain to the person at the end of that torture. You wouldn't want your child to be tortured, right? Or imagine that your kid is either being born with some sort of disease that is going to give them immense suffering, or perhaps they develop some sort of condition at a very early age that gives them this sort of suffering. And perhaps they're not going to live long. Perhaps they're just going to live, I don't know, 5 years. And those are going to be 5 years of intense pain. Would you ask yourself, would it be better for your child to never be born instead of living this sort of life? Yeah, then you can ask yourself, well, sure, but those are extreme cases. What about all those cases of people who enjoy their life, right? And yeah, sure, most of us enjoy life, either most of the time or at some points, but there is a certain injustice there, right? Because not everyone will experience the good in life. Not everyone will experience joy and happiness and all of that, right? But it is almost a guarantee that all of us will experience suffering, at least to some degree. I mean, no single person experiences an equal amount of suffering and equal amount of joy in their life, right? It's very unpredictable. It's sort of like playing a lottery, and a lot of the time we say that life is a lottery. You know, you can win this lottery or you can lose it. So while there are some lucky few people, this top 1% who will live amazing lives, mostly because they have the materials to live that sort of life, you know, luxurious life filled with pleasure and joy and happiness, while a lot of people out there are starving, they are dying, they are suffering, they are losing their family members in wars, kids who are losing their parents, parents who are losing their kids, and so on. Then you really start to ask yourself, is it really moral to give life to someone if you know that this is what life has to offer? And my take on antinatalism is to extend not only to humans but to animals as well. Animals experience all that suffering as well. Perhaps not the politically charged suffering, as a lot of suffering on humans is inflicted through political means. That is usually not the case for animals unless a human is inflicting that sort of suffering on animals. But you know, if you are born as a non-human animal, usually you're either a prey or a predator.
Why don't you take a seat right over there?
This is something I always found very sad in a way, because it's such an awful thing to be born with the purpose of being eaten by other creatures, to be source of energy and nutrition for that creature. Like, that's your purpose. And those animals end up suffering immensely because of that. They experience all that pain of being killed. And there are predators out there who don't just kill their victims, they are inflicting pain on them, keeping them alive. There are some animals who actually really like to torture their prey before they kill them. We tend to think that humans are the only animal on this planet who kills for pleasure and not just survival, but that is not the case. Cats, apes, and some other animals do that. And you know, at its core, antinatalism is a pessimistic philosophy, really. And a lot of philosophers who subscribe to antinatalism were definitely pessimists. And some examples I can think of right away: David Benatar, Schopenhauer, and Zapffe. Schopenhauer definitely expressed some really pessimistic and antinatalist views over the years, but I wish to focus on Benatar and Zapffe. Zapffe is actually for me at least, a local philosopher. Used to be. He's been dead for over 30 years now. He's a Norwegian philosopher, as David Benatar is a philosopher from the Republic of South Africa. And I think they both made some of the most compelling arguments for the case of antinatalism. And starting with Benatar, his argument is called a assymetry argument. And it goes something like this. Imagine there are two scenarios, scenario A and scenario B. In scenario A, X exists. X being anything, any living person or living animal. In scenario A, where X is alive, X will experience a pleasure of pain. And pleasure of pain, what am I talking about? In scenario A, where X is alive, X will experience the presence of pain and presence of pleasure. The degree of both can't really be predicted, but there's the unfair element of that, because pain is a guarantee, but the level of pleasure is not a guarantee. Now, Benatar considers the presence of pain as bad. I don't think that is something most people would agree on. And considers the presence of pleasure as good. And that is something most people would agree on as well. Now, in scenario B, X never comes to be. X is never born. What that entails is the absence of pain, but also absence of pleasure. Now, the absence of pain is obviously good, but the absence of pleasure is neutral. It's neither a good thing nor a bad thing. Now, if we do a little math around it and we assign number 1 to that which is good, number -1 to that which is neutral, and -2 to that which is bad, scenario A would give us the result of -1, whereas scenario B would give us the result of 0, pure neutrality. Therefore, not existing would be a preferable alternative to existing. Now, I find the argument of Zapffe to be much more interesting, because Zapffe concluded that the existence of humans as we are right now is really sort of a paradox. We are too self-conscious to be living animals, really. Just think about it. No other animal on this planet is as anxious as we are. They are just, biologically programmed to fulfill their role as a biological organism without really thinking too much about it.
Perfect organism.
We are aware of what we are. We are aware of the of our mortality, of how frail we are as humans, as living beings, and that we are limited to our bodies, that we are animals, and it really messes with people's heads if you think about it. And because of that, we are not as good at fulfilling our biological role as other animals are. Are we really a sort of paradox? I find this thought to be very interesting, because that is those are thoughts I have been struggling with my entire life, basically since I was maybe 3 years old. This awareness of you being a human, the awareness of your mortality, the fact that you're going to die, the fact that your life here is limited, and as well as the fact that I have been assigned a role in this world that I never asked for. I just been inserted into this machine as a cog in its hole. It feels really strange, to be honest, and it's understandable. I think some parents, at least not all parents, but some, have kids not necessarily because they think this will be good for a kid. Like, how can it be good for someone who not yet exists? A lot of the time they do it because they're thinking, I want someone to take care of me when I get older, or they're doing it sort of to fulfill their own desire to have a child. I think it's very, very common for parents to have a kid to fulfill their own desire to have a kid, rather than it being about the child. It usually never is about the child, because how can it be about someone that does not yet exist? You have no actual connection to a non-existent person. At that point, it's just a concept in your head. It's sort of like having an imaginary girlfriend or boyfriend in your head, this sort of ideal that you have, in this window in your head, this sort of metaphysical projection of your ideal partner. But it's not like through that projection you actually care about a specific person out there. It's all about you. So what exactly was the reason that I abandoned this way of thinking? Or I wouldn't necessarily say that I abandoned this way of thinking, but I just don't think it's the most productive way of thinking. First of all, want to sort of take you back to a conversation I had with a friend of mine some years ago, where I had definitely very antinatalistic views around the time. He didn't really, and his argument was that, but life is good, you know, and I was thinking, you know, just because life is good for you doesn't mean it's good for everyone, right? And yeah, if you think of life as, yeah, you know, life is good, obviously you wouldn't want life to be gone because you're enjoying yourself. But there's a lot of people out there who are suffering, right? Funny thing is, he actually became more antinatalistic over the years, whereas I became less antinatalistic. But primarily what happened in the last 2 years or so, 2-3 years, is that I became less depressed. I became more happy and more content. I have been working on my mental health, and as a result of that I also became less pessimistic, and pessimistic philosophy just wasn't as appealing to me as it was before. Interesting, right? It's almost as if we try to rationalize our own feelings, intellectualize them into creating some solid arguments, but I think a lot of the time behind our reasoning there are just raw feelings or raw perception of reality based on our subjective feelings. And the fact that I saw life as primarily bad reflected the fact that me as a person subjectively viewed life in that way. But I don't think that argument would be sufficient against antinatalism, because again, that will be just me claiming, hey, you know what, I got better, I am sort of enjoying life now, so I'm no longer an antinatalist, but by doing that I would ignore the suffering of others. So I don't think that argument in and of itself is sufficient. So let's expand the way we view optimism. What I mean by that, it's not my own personal optimism, the way I approach life and the way I approach people. We're talking about potentiality of humanity. If you look at human history, it's filled with pain, it is filled with war and suffering, and it's, you know, it's horrible, right? Like, if you want to read the worst horror story out there, read a history book. But at the same time, I can't really ignore the ways in which we have improved human life through technological means or through political means. Things are bad, you know? If many years ago you were to be born with any sort of condition that makes you highly disabled, unable to function physically, you'd be doomed, right? But thanks to things like wheelchairs, prosthetics, and a lot of modern equipment that makes life for people with disabilities so much easier, we made an improvement for that. We made life better, and at best we're not just utilizing their physical function, but we also made it easier for people to live good life, live a meaningful life. You know, just because you're disabled does not mean your life can have meaning. You can still be happy, you can live your full life, and that is beautiful. That is really, really beautiful. Agriculture is yet another example, right? I mean, the green revolution we have seen in the second half of the 20th century has given food on the tables of so many people. We have managed to feed so many people thanks to that. Innovation is improving the quality of people's life, and of course it can be better. I'm not saying things are perfect by any means, but things are getting better, and through political means we have given rights to people who did not have them before, you know, racial and sexual minorities and so on. We have improved rights of women and so on. Like, it is better to be alive today than it was to be alive 100, 200, 300 years ago. And if you go further back, you know, it might have been worse. Although, you know, I think I'd rather be born in ancient Greece than in medieval Europe. But those are exceptions to the cases, and you know, those exceptions can always happen. History has had some of, you know, its dark ages for sure. But you know, if you look at the world today, and you know, if you turn on the news, or you read the news, or you watch political content on YouTube, you know, you see a lot of bad shit, right? There's war and conflict, people dying, you know, there's like genocide happening in this very moment. What is happening in Palestine is really, really horrible. And then there's, you know, Russia invading Ukraine. There's the possibility of China invading Taiwan and all of that. And you might be, you know, looking at it and thinking, we are doomed. We are doomed. And I don't blame you if that's what you think. But, you know, this is what's been happening all this time, really. That's just the same cycle repeating itself. But with every single cycle, we've been doing something better. And I think that's enough for me to have some faith in humanity. So I'm an optimist, right? I'm thinking, yeah, there's a lot of bad shit happening, but look at how things are getting better. Look how things can get better in the future. And it's very tragic, you know, that people are losing their lives. But it's not my fault. And just because I tend to focus on the good things, it doesn't really take away from the fact that those people are dying. They will be dying anyway. But all the suffering and pain humans have experienced over the years, I don't want it to be lost. Because if we assume the antinatalist scenario and we all stop reproducing, no people are being born and we just die out, all of that suffering would be in vain. What about the potentiality of humans? Everything we have achieved is now ruins. All the knowledge we have possessed, all the wisdom we have built over the years, it's all gone. Antinatalism is just so nihilistic, you know? And that's no longer how I view the world, really. I think that there's so much we can do in the future to improve people's lives, and I really want to see where we will go in 100, 200, 1,000 years. And you know, there's a high chance I'm going to be dead by that time. But I'm so hoping for technological and medical means to live a very, very long time, because I want to watch humanity grow. It's probably my biggest dream, to watch humanity grow across hundreds and thousands of years, because that gives you a perspective that history books will never ever give you. And of course, I don't really have any good reason to believe that the future will be perfect. I never ever believed in a utopia or of any sorts, but I do think that things will be better. While a lot of bad shit will be happening as well, but I have high hopes for humanity. I'm definitely an optimist. Now, the second reason why I'm no longer an antinatalist is because I find it to be a solution that is impossible to achieve, at least as of right now, where people are reproducing. If we manage to fully convert human reproduction to machine reproduction, if we can grow humans in lab, you know, we can decide, alright, let's cancel this shit, let's be the last generations. But as long as people are responsible for their own reproductive system, that's never going to happen, because number one, a lot of people want to have kids, and number two, people are horny bastards. I mean, have you seen humans? Have you seen us? So we will never achieve the state where everyone stops having kids. The worst case scenario is when a lot of people stop having kids, but not everyone. Because low birth rate, what will that lead to? Well, most likely the end of civilization, but also a lot more suffering. And if we are to reduce suffering, reducing birth rate would actually create more suffering, because now you have a lot of old people, but not enough young people to support them. Those elderly people will probably not be able to afford their retirement if there's not enough young people working, and who will take care of those old people? So, you know, it's very understandable why, let's say, countries like Japan wants to inspire young people to have more kids, right? Because like the birth rate in Japan is very low, but at the same time, it's also sort of like, hey, we want you to have more kids because we need more slaves in our system, you know? We need to force your kids into being pawns in our games to stimulate the economy and all of that. Like, you know, it's not about what benefits humanity, it's about what benefits the system, what benefits the corporations and so on. And should we really be pawns in that system? Should we? Let's imagine a scenario where there's an evil dictator ruling the land, and people decide, we will be the last generation, you will no longer rule over us, you will no longer rule over our kids because we will not have kids. And let's, you know, it's a hypothetical scenario, but let's assume everyone in that country stops having kids because they don't want this ruler to rule over their kids. And at that point, yeah, you know, that's your winning card. Like, boom. It's a perfect solution to end a dictatorship, in a way. So, in that sense, I think there's some merit to antinatalism. I'm not saying antinatalism is stupid or anything like that, no. If it was, it would never become appealing to me in the first place, you know? And even though I changed my mind, I don't think antinatalism is a bad or a wrong ideology. It's just that I see things a little differently now. Another thing is, and it really relates to the way Benatar sees the world, it's about, you know, the presence and lack of pleasure and pain, but, well, it's not all about physical and psychological pleasure and joy. There's another component a lot of antinatalists are not talking about, because many antinatalists have a very utilitarian approach, and that missing element is meaning. And you can find meaning even in a hard life. And a lot of the time we actually need struggle. We need to struggle to find meaning in our life. An easy life in which everything is just given to you, you get everything on a plate, you're probably not going, your life is probably going to have less meaning. It's much more meaningful if it's something you have achieved, if it's something you have worked for, and we need that. We need that struggle to stimulate us. I don't think all suffering is bad, to be honest. I think there's a lot of unnecessary suffering, and I think we should reduce that, but I don't believe in reducing all suffering. Such as philosophers like David Pearce believe that we should abolish all suffering. I don't believe in that. I think suffering is necessary for us. And my final thoughts relating to Zapffe, I definitely think he's right there, that we are sort of way too self-aware to be living in a body like this. But instead of seeing it as a reason as to why we should not exist, I just look at it in a way that we have gained enough consciousness to be able to overcome our natural state. We have developed enough self-consciousness to transcend what we are, and we have been transcending what we are throughout the entirety of human history. I mean, we've been using prosthetics for missing limbs since before antiquity. We have pulled ourselves out of the natural state in which we are vulnerable, and we have always found ways to improve our condition. And I strongly believe that because of this ability that we possess, we are able to use technology to our advantage. We are able to use technology to improve our lives. And to what degree are we going to transcend our nature? Well, obviously I can't really know that, but will we do that? I have very little doubt to think that it's not a question of yes or no, it's a question of to what degree and to what degree should we. So to conclude, I think that antinatalism is a very interesting ideology to explore. I think it makes some compelling arguments. I don't think everything about antinatalism is wrong. There's a lot of truth to it. But here's the thing. A lot of things are true. That doesn't necessarily mean they're the best argument out there. I don't think there is such a thing as the best argument out there. And things that are true, you can argue against that. And two things can be true at the same time. I think, you know, if you're looking into it too much, it will just fuel your pessimism. And by doing that, you're no longer looking at things in an objective way. So I think take antinatalism with a grain of salt, but don't disregard it, because I think antinatalists are pointing out a lot of the things that are wrong with our condition, things that we need to change. But by assuming the antinatalist position, you're not working to change that. It is sort of a way of giving up. I don't believe in giving up. I believe that we have to struggle and proceed further, but at the same time I'm still asking myself, if we bring new people into this world to achieve that goal, aren't we sort of using people to achieve those means? People who never asked to be part of that? And I think that's a genuine question to ask. And even though I don't no longer consider myself an antinatalist, I still entertain this idea, because, you know, it could be right. Maybe it really is immoral to use people in this way. And then we have to ask ourselves, are we creating technology and innovation in order to give people a better life? Are we doing this for humanity, or are we using humanity for the purpose of innovation? Is it technology working for humans? Is it humans working for technology? And I'll leave you with this question so you can think about it, and I'm curious to know what you think. I've been rambling for quite a long time, but I really enjoyed doing this video. So, my friend, I hope you have a good week, or a good day, and good year, and happy birthday if it's your birthday today. And take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon in a new video. So, ciao.